Hello, everybody. Welcome into the latest Windy City Gridiron Radio over here at Windy City Gridiron, your best source for Bears news over SB Nation. Joining you, as always, is me. Coincidentally, I'm solo tonight, Robert Zaglinski, editor over at Windy City. And we kind of have to set the table for this because Mitch-a-palooza begins on Monday night. Against the Vikings, currently a top 5 defense or an elite defense. And we kind of have to set the table for this. We kind of have to preview it because this will be one of the more exciting times or exciting games for Bears fans, for anyone following the Bears, covering the Bears in recent memory, certainly hype-wise. To help do that, we have daily Norseman editor, our Vikings site over SB Nation, Christopher Gates, joining us. Christopher, what's up, man?
Not much, Robert. Things are going pretty good. Just looking forward to Monday night. How about things on your end?
Yeah, like I mentioned to you right before pregame, just relaxing, just waiting for the Cubs, hopefully not to disappoint us all, which coincidentally they might do on Monday as well. At any rate.
They can't do a whole lot worse than Minnesota's baseball team did this postseason.
Oh,
but...
yeah. Got shellacked by the Yankees, if I remember correctly. I'm not trash talking. I'm actually asking. If I don't...
They lost to the Yankees. They got off to a 3-0 lead in the top of the first, and the final wound up being 8-4. So the first half an inning was all right, but the 8 innings that followed were not so much.
Well, they exceeded expectations, didn't they? They weren't really supposed to be a playoff team.
They did. They were the first team in Major League history to go from losing at least 100 games in a season to making the playoffs the next season, which is significant. But yeah, it still kind of hurts getting the Yankees again.
Yeah, no one likes to lose to the Yankees or the Red Sox of the world. I totally get it. Let's get to the football. So, I just mentioned it. It'll be the Bears quarterback of the future, ideal, hopeful star, whatever else. His first start, Mitch Trubisky, is coming against the Vikings on Monday night. One of the best defenses in the league, one of the more talented overall teams in the league. And I wanted to ask you before we sort of get into everything that's been going on with the Vikings of late as a team, independent of the Bears. What do you make of what to expect from Mike Zimmer to throw at Trubisky, a rookie quarterback in his first start in primetime?
Well, I mean, on the surface, you wouldn't think this would be the ideal situation for a rookie making his first start. I mean, it's prime time, and like you said, the Vikings defense has been looking really good over the first 4 weeks of the season so far. But with that being said, this is the Bears and the Vikings, and it is at Soldier Field, and weird stuff seems to happen when these two teams get together in Chicago for whatever reason. So I would expect young Trubisky to see a whole lot of things that he hasn't seen before. I definitely don't think the Vikings are going to make it easy on him, or at least try not to make it easy on him. And like I said, a lot of weird things happen, so I'm kind of hesitant to just say that the Vikings are going to go out and crush this kid's spirit or anything like that. But, ideally, that's what would happen. But it's going to be interesting to watch exactly how Mike Zimmer and this defense handle this young quarterback.
Yeah, you're mentioning those weird things. So one of your guys, Ted Glover, pointed it out, and I actually researched just like recent history. So the last 4 major, and I'm doing the like an asterisk type thing with my fingers, doing the Richard Nixon hyphens. The last 4 major Bears starting quarterbacks in their first start against the Vikings at Soldier Field all won. So that's Chad Hutchinson. He's the guy that's probably not major. Rex Grossman, Kyle Orton, and Jake Cutler all won their first starts at Soldier Field against Minnesota. And they didn't all necessarily play well, but for whatever reason, it's a quarterback win. They won their first, and I guess that's just something that happens. I think I even saw an article up on your guys' website about some kind of crazy Indian alien burial ground. Obviously, that's under Soldier Field. That keeps the Vikings from beating rookie quarterbacks in their first starts. Can you explain this phenomenon? I mean, it's really not something that's independent of any. I mean, it's really not something that it just seems coincidental more than anything.
It really is. I mean, it's just weird stuff, and it's not just quarterbacks, because there was the one year the Vikings came into Soldier Field on a Monday night, and it was the zombie Favre year, so they were still fighting for home field advantage in the NFC. And yeah, came into Chicago on a Monday night, and Devin Aromashadu, I believe, put up about 150 yards and 2 touchdowns against the Vikings, and they lost in overtime. And it's just stuff you don't see coming when these two teams get together in Chicago. I mean, I'm sure strange things have happened in games in Minneapolis too, but it just seems all of the really strange stuff happens in Chicago, and more often than not, it keeps the Vikings from being successful.
Let's jump over to the Vikings before we'll get to Trubisky later. Okay, so let's talk about the offense first. 7th ranked in the league right now in terms of total yardage. I'm looking at the offense. The offense is 5th ranked DVOA wise, but they had a huge loss last week, losing Dalvin Cook, rookie Dalvin Cook, to a torn ACL. Sam Bradford may or may not play on Monday night, but that obviously be a huge boost if he can. So the first month of the season has been ideal, has been ideal offensive performance-wise, but can they mitigate these losses? Like, I feel like Bradford and Cook have been the biggest reason why the team has been lighting it up.
I think Cook has been a huge part of it. I mean, he just gives the Vikings the ability to do so many things that they haven't been able to do in the past. I mean, I know Adrian Peterson is an all-time great and whatnot, but he's had the same limitations for so long. He doesn't run well out of the shotgun. He doesn't pass block well. He's not a great receiver. And because of that, it held the Vikings offense back quite a bit. With the addition of Dalvin Cook, Cook has been outstanding at all of those things. He might be behind Thielen and Diggs. He might have the 3rd most receptions for the Vikings right now. In fact, I'm pretty sure he does. Obviously, going into last week, he was in the top 3 in the NFL in rushing yardage. And, he just gave the offense that element of, unpredictability and the ability to just do so many things that it keeps opposing defenses off balance. As far as the quarterback situation, it's been really up and down. Bradford obviously had the big game in the opener, and then because he got hurt, Case Keenum had little time to prepare for the game in Pittsburgh. And then with a full week of prep, Keenum came back and did a great job against Tampa Bay. And then obviously we saw what happened last week. The Bears aren't a pushover on defense or anything, and it's going to be interesting to see what John Fox and company can throw at this offense, because with the loss of Cook, the Vikings might have to have a change in their offensive philosophy, because I don't think the running game is going to be quite the same as it was.
I was going to mention that. Do you expect Latavius Murray to be able to he's not an awful backup plan or running back. This was a guy who had over 1,000 yards with the Raiders last year, even if that team has a much better offensive line than the Vikings do. I mean, how do you expect him to perform in Cook's absence, since he's probably the starter now?
Well, I mean, the plan before Dalvin Cook fell into Minnesota's lap on draft weekend was for Murray to be the starter. And, he's kind of like Cook in the respect that he can do all those different things that you need a running back in today's NFL to do. He's a great pass blocker. He can catch the ball. He was very good in short yardage, although, like you said, that was for a Raiders team that had one of the best offensive lines in the league. The thing about him is that he was dealing with an ankle injury during the preseason, and apparently he said that it's still not quite 100%, but it would be good enough for him to be able to handle the load as a running back. The team did go out and sign Stevan Ridley a couple of days ago, the former Patriots running back. He hasn't done anything in a couple of years, but apparently he had a pretty solid preseason for Denver this year. And yeah, the Vikings without Cook are going to have to probably go with more of a committee sort of look if they want to get anything done on the ground.
So the passing game, we just mentioned it with the quarterbacks, but the passing game, receiving wise, hasn't really tailored off at all. I mean, Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen are lighting it up. Kyle Rudolph, fresh off of a Pro Bowl season, is having another good year. I mean, this is, to me, and I don't think people give enough credit to this offense. This, to me, is probably one of the more overall talented offensive cores, and it's kind of led by that trio right there. Your thoughts so far? I mean, Diggs has 22 receptions for 391 yards in 4 games. Thielen has 24 receptions for 358 yards. I mean, that's a pretty solid number one and number two duo right there.
It really is. I mean, they don't get the kind of press, obviously, that guys like, Julio Jones and Antonio Brown and guys like that get. But, as far as a 1-2 punch goes, I'm not sure if there's anyone in the league right now that's performing at the level that those two guys are. And, we expected the offense to be better this year, largely because it couldn't have gotten much worse than it was last season. But, I don't think anybody saw Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen both being in the top 3 or top 5 in receiving yardage in the NFL after the first quarter of the season. And, more than anything, I think this is a function of what they've done on the offensive line, because last year's Vikings offensive line was a disaster from start to finish, and they spent money on a couple of guys that weren't really super heralded or anything, in Riley and Mike Remmers. And, like we've said numerous times on the site, the Vikings don't need to get their offensive line to the level of, say, Dallas or Oakland or a team like that. They just need to have an offensive line that isn't a complete disaster on every snap. And, now that they have that, it actually gives the quarterback, whether it's Bradford or Keenum, time to throw something more than a 5-yard check down pass. Yeah. And, it's really opened up the offense for this team so far.
Let's move over to the defense. So the defense, I think I misspoke. They're not exactly – they're the talent. There's obviously a lot of talent, but performance-wise hasn't totally been reflective of that talent so far. They're 13th in total yards and 19th in DVOA. I feel like that's almost bullying, kind of based off of the Bradford injury and kind of stinkers a little bit against the Lions and Steelers in that respect. But Everson Griffin leads the NFL in sacks. I think a lot of people are talking about him as a Defensive Player of the Year candidate. Harrison Smith is still one of the bigger forces at safety in the league, Pro Bowl caliber type player. Daniel Hunter. I mean, are you satisfied so far with their performance? Do you think they could be better? Do you think that they're kind of feeling the effects of last year's collapse down the stretch?
I definitely think that the defense has performed about as well as you could hope for. I mean, obviously the front four is getting pressure on the quarterback, like you said. Griffin, Hunter, Linval Joseph has been playing pretty well so far. And, that gives the guys in the secondary a lot of opportunities. And the secondary has been playing incredibly well, too. I mean, you mentioned Harrison Smith. There's Xavier Rhodes, who might be playing on a level higher than any other corner in the league right now, given the level of competition he's faced over the first 4 weeks. I mean, the Vikings defense just has a ton of talent at all 3 levels. And, as long as the offense can do something they didn't do last season and stay on the field, so they're not playing defense for 32 to 35 minutes a game and actually getting some time to rest, I think this defense is going to cause a lot of problems for pretty much everybody going forward.
Pretty much everybody, yeah. I was going to actually ask, so who's a player you've kind of been disappointed by so far on either side of the ball? And then I'm going to ask a little more probing question that I'm not sure if you're going to want to be able to talk about, or want to talk about, rather. You'll be able to talk about it.
I'm trying to think of anyone that's really been a disappointment. I mean, the name that I think most Viking fans are going to gravitate towards as far as that's concerned is Trey Waynes. This is his 3rd season, and we were expecting to see quite a bit more development from him, but he got just worked over in the game against the Steelers. had a couple of huge penalties and gave up a big reception in that game. And, when you've got Xavier Rhodes on the other side at cornerback, teams are going to throw at you a lot. And, you need to be able to be up to the challenge. And there's been way more times this year than there should be for a first round number 11 overall selection where Waynes just hasn't been up to it. And, he this offseason, the Vikings are going to have to decide whether or not they want to pick up his fifth-year option on his contract. And so basically he's playing for a big deal going forward. And if he wants that, he needs to really step up his game going forward.
This wasn't going to be the question I asked, but since you're bringing up a first-round pick, why has Laquan Treadwell struggled so much early on in his career? He's not exactly looking like the playmaker he was at Ole Miss. I'd imagine you could attribute some of that to a late injury in his college career. But at any rate, I mean, right now, I'm just looking at the stats. He only has 5 receptions on the year, and last year he was also in single digits when it was all said and done. So what's the story behind that?
I think last year you probably could have gone with the injury excuse because, the injury he suffered at Ole Miss was really bad. I think it involved a ankle dislocation and something else that happened with one of his legs. And, he only had 1 reception as a rookie. And, I think for last season, you could probably look to the injury as an excuse. He might not have been completely healthy. He might not have been completely sure of himself. But now he's had a full off season. And, I think part of it might actually have to do with generally at times he's been probably the number 5 option if the Vikings have all their regular
Wow.
When the Vikings have all their regular receivers and running backs out on the field, you got to think that Diggs is an option before Treadwell. Thielen is an option before Treadwell. Rudolph is an option, and until he got hurt, Dalvin Cook was probably an option too. So, I mean, those 4 guys, I don't know, it might be more of a function of those 4 guys just being players that the quarterback looks at before they look at Treadwell. I'm not sure how many plays have actually been designed to go to Laquan Treadwell as the first read, but with Diggs and Thielen tearing it up the way they have been, maybe the targets just haven't been there for him.
On a scale of 1 to 10, what would you say is the panic button regarding Treadwell?
I think it's got to be getting close to about a 7 or an 8 at this point, and particularly now that this week is going to be the first week on the roster for Michael Floyd after his return from a suspension. And Floyd looked outstanding during the preseason, even though, like I said, he's missed the first 4 games of this year. And, if Floyd comes in and can carry on what he did during this preseason, that's going to limit Treadwell's targets and snaps even more. So he's another guy who, like Waynes, probably needs to step it up and show the coaches something, or he's going to be in danger of not. He might not be long for the league if he doesn't step it up here sooner or later.
All right, so this was so last year, obviously the Vikings started 5-0, ended up missing the playoffs, 8-8 season. There was a lot of drama towards the end of the year with Zimmer having eye surgery, with some drama, Terrence Newman against the Packers. What happened with that collapse? Because that team looked like a Super Bowl contender 5 weeks in, and you never want to anoint the team so early, but they looked unstoppable, and then it just felt like a slow nosedive.
They started 5-0, and then they had the bye week, and I think over the bye week, teams finally realized that the offensive line couldn't block anybody.
That's blunt.
They had the I believe their rushing offense last year was 32nd in the league. They barely averaged 3 yards a carry. And, if you can't run the football in the National Football League, even though it is a passing league, you need to be able to run the football a little bit to be able to, keep defenses honest and whatnot. And they couldn't do that. TJ Clemmings at left tackle was a total disaster, and he's been replaced now. And, this offense just didn't allow Bradford to do anything last year. I mean, people give Sam Bradford a lot of grief for, checking down and throwing 5-yard passes and whatnot, but most of the time that's really all he had time to do, because by the time he would get to the end of his drop back, he already had defenders in his face or, chasing after him and whatnot. And, when your offensive line limits you that much, there's, not much you can do, and they couldn't sustain drives. And, the defense, I think, just eventually wore down toward the end of the season. And, hopefully with the offensive line replacements we have now, we don't have to worry about that happening this season.
Yeah, how pleased have you been by Riley Reif's addition? I think he's looked solid so far.
Given what TJ Clemmings and Matt Khalil gave us over the past 2 seasons, I am absolutely with what Riley Reif has done.
Anything's an upgrade.
Just about anything would have been an upgrade. I mean, even we brought the fossilized husk of Jake Long in for a few weeks last season, and he started looking decent for a couple games, and then of course he tore his Achilles tendon and he wound up retiring. So threw Clemmings back out there again, and he was still a disaster. But Reif, the Reif contract was something that I think the Vikings caught a lot of grief for as well. But like I said earlier, with the talent the Vikings have at the skill positions, they don't have to have the top offensive line in the NFL. They just have to get guys out there that are not regularly terrible. And Reif has been, significantly above average for the Vikings at left tackle. And, you can't put too high a value on having a decent left tackle now.
Who is kind of an underrated name that people might not know about that has been lighting it up or has quietly been putting up a big-time performance on the Vikings?
Even though
you could think of somebody.
I think a guy that I know Viking fans know about, and another guy who's in line to potentially get a big contract here going forward, is going to be Eric Kendricks. I know he's not a household name or anything like that yet, but he is pretty quickly developed into one of the better all-around linebackers, I think. I mean, his coverage skills have improved a lot since his rookie season. And, he's just the kind of guy, he's all over the field. He's always around the football, making plays. And he is really one of the keys to this Vikings defense, I think. I'm not sure if it would function quite as well with anybody else playing that middle linebacker spot as it does with Kendricks.
Okay, so now let's get into the actual nitty-gritty of the game. On offense, what is a matchup in your mind? So when it's the Vikings, when it's the Vikings offense versus the Bears defense, what are you most concerned about, and what will you be looking for?
Well, I'm thinking it's going to be interesting to see how well the Vikings do establish the run game in Cook's absence, and how much they can do with Latavius Murray and potentially Jerick McKinnon, because if they can't get the run game going, that's going to give the Bears an opportunity to kind of get after Keenum or Bradford a little bit. And so hopefully the Vikings can come out and get that established, keep the Bears defense a little bit honest, and keep them from hanging back and slowing down guys like Diggs and Thielen and even Rudolph. So I think that's going to be a big key for the Vikings offense.
Yeah, I don't necessarily want to rub it in too much, but I believe the start of that Vikings collapse was also a Monday night game against the Bears last year, where the Bears had – I don't have it right in front of me, but it was a plethora of sacks from Leonard Floyd, Akeem Hicks, and company. Mm-hmm. So just mentioning that.
No, it's really cool.
Okay, and then – so when it's the Bears offense, obviously the story will be Trubisky against whatever mix-up of coverages and blitzes that's going to happen here. I think a lot of the game will be one pre-snap, Trubisky getting the offense into the right plays, and the Vikings trying to confuse Trubisky and take advantage of his inexperience. So aside from play-wise, the Trubisky's are more athletic. Unfortunately, you guys won't be able to play the statuesque Mike Glennon. Unfortunately, I know you're really broken up about that.
I am, because man, that dude looked awful most of the time for you guys. It was rough watching that guy try to quarterback.
Eight turnovers in 4 games, Chris. 8 turnovers in 4 games. Just that's all I have to say. But anyway, what will you? We touched that at the start of the podcast. What is the key to stopping Trubisky here? We don't know what kind of player he is in the NFL. All we have is preseason tape and college tape. But what will be the key for you stopping him and for him to stop him from being that kind of catalyst for the Bears offense?
I actually think the bigger key to stopping Mitch Trubisky lies in stopping the guy that destroyed the Vikings twice last year, and that would be Jordan Howard.
Okay.
Because, if Jordan Howard goes off and is rushing for 170 and 180 yards, then the Vikings are going to have to cheat guys up to stop him, and that's going to allow Trubisky, more simplistic, probably easier coverages to deal with, and then he's going to be able to do whatever he wants. Howard just crushed this team last season. I mean, even in the last game of the season at US Bank Stadium, I believe he still went over 100 yards, even though the Bears looked like they kind of mailed that one in. But yeah, if Howard gets going the way he did last year against the Vikings, then Trubisky is going to have a lot more to play off of. He's going to have a lot more manageable down and distance situations, and that's going to allow him to be able to move the offense more easily, I think. So if I'm the Vikings, as much energy and whatnot as Mitch Trubisky is going to bring to the Bears offense, I'm actually probably more interested in keeping Jordan Howard contained, because if they can keep Howard contained, then they're going to be able to come after Trubisky with all those blitzes and exotic coverages that he might not be used to.
All right, Chris, final 2 things. So give me a Trubisky stat line. So let's do yards, touchdowns, picks, and those 3. And then also completions and attempts. And then give me your pick for the game with the score and why.
Stat line for Trubisky, let me see here. I think he's probably going to be about 50% passings. We'll go about 22 out of 40. Give him about 240 yards or so. And we'll throw in a touchdown and 2 interceptions.
Okay. That's actually higher than what I would have expected. I think that's probably reasonable. All right.
I'm hoping that some of that has to do with the fact that the Vikings will hopefully be ahead toward the end of the game.
Garbage time? Okay, fair enough.
But, we'll see. And like I said, there's too many weird things that happen to Chicago for me to get super confident or anything like that.
So no. So what? No. What's your score? You're not gonna pick it. You're not gonna pick a game.
Final score. I will go Vikings 27, Bears 17.
Okay, that's actually that fits in line with your not getting up. You're getting your hopes too high. Just
yes.
Remember, as noted, Soldier Field is built on an alien Indian pseudo burial ground for the Vikings, so that's certainly plausible. Chris, thanks for joining us. That is Christopher Gates. He is the editor-in-chief over at the Daily Norseman, the Vikings website for SB Nation. You can follow him and them at Daily Norseman or at the Daily Norseman. I'm doing it up.
It's just at Daily Norseman.
At Daily Norseman on Twitter for all the best possible Vikings analysis. You'll find out, in my opinion at least, on the interwebs. And again, Chris, thanks for hopping on. Looking forward to a good game at minimum. Hopefully one of us is going to have some fun. So looking forward to a good game on Monday night.
I certainly hope so. Thank you for having me, Robert. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, anytime. That's Christopher Gates from the Daily Norseman, Vikings editor for that website. And now now that I'm solo, so let's jump into. Well, the biggest story is, as we kind of talked about, I tried to mesh in Mitch-a-palooza, and I tried to focus on the Vikings and such because that was the guest. But you can't hype up a Bears game of recent memory in my mind any more than Trubisky's debut. I mean, in the past 6 years, the Bears obviously haven't made the postseason, so they haven't played many meaningful games, any truly meaningful games throughout the regular season. And so aside from maybe the 2013 de facto NFC North title game against the Packers, this is probably the biggest, most hyped, most relevant Bears game since the 2011 NFC Championship game. I don't know if Mitch Trubisky is going to be good. I think as Andrew and Lester and whoever's been co-hosting WCG radio with me over this past month and over the entire summer, we're excited about what he can offer. He's clearly a smart athlete. He's clearly well in line to be a successful NFL quarterback, provided his work ethic and natural ability. But you just don't know until it actually happens on the field. But in terms of hype and in terms of the future finally being given the opportunity, a night game, and the energy that's almost certainly going to be palpable at Soldier Field on Monday night. I mean, I don't want to hyperbolize it too much, but that game, for whoever is in attendance, and if you're watching, and for most of you who'll be watching on TV, I mean, it's probably going to feel like a playoff game. And you'll see the Bears' performance, I think, in many ways reflect that, because they'll be playing for the guy that they know is the one that's going to have to lead them to the promised land. There's a big factor, I think. Momentum, to me, doesn't exist in sports, like the actual concept of momentum, but confidence does. And what you saw with Mike Glennon over the first 4 weeks, where he was turning the ball over, generally wasn't reading the defense downfield, the team knew that. And so when he would start going down the tank, subconsciously, whatever else, performance for everybody else would in turn do the same. You have Trubisky coming in, a guy who can actually make every throw and a guy who offers promise and hope and is that hyped number 2 overall pick. There'll be a little bit more guys jumping around on their toes for the Bears moving forward, at least for this first game, especially in front of the national audience, in front of a Soldier Field crowd for Trubisky's debut. Especially that defense that might be able to play with the lead for the first time. Guys like Leonard Floyd and Akeem Hicks being able to pin their ears back. Offensively, these receivers, what I called it a 4-game suspension essentially for Kendall Wright and Deontay Thompson and Joshua Bellamy and company. They're not the greatest receivers, but with Mike Glennon, they might as well be essentially neutralized because he's not even going to look downfield most of the time. His primary read is going to be a check down to Jordan Howard or Tariq Cohen. Now they get to kind of climb out of the hole and see what it's like to see an actual accurate quarterback, a quarterback who can make plays and isn't afraid to to expand the offense's playbook. There's a lot riding on this game, as much as irrelevant as it is in terms of a first start and in a Bears team that's not close to contending. You're getting the first look at the future. You're getting this kind of sets the table for hopefully the next 10 to 15 years. This keeps the Bears relevant. There hasn't been this much excitement around the Bears in my mind in a long time. And you have to craft the perfect game plan. You have to kind of expect the best and the worst in that respect. If Trubisky lights it up against the Vikings, a talented defense, okay, yeah, awesome, fantastic. But it's not going to mean anything until he starts stringing together. There have been plenty of talented rookie quarterbacks and talented young quarterbacks that have gotten off the blazing starts and eventually tapered off. There has to be a consistency built up over this season, and then he has to carry it over next time. It's not going to mean anything if he does against the Vikings. If Trubisky throws 500 yards and 5 touchdowns, fantastic. I can't tell you how excited I'll be. I can't tell you how excited all of you will be if he does that on Monday night, but it won't mean anything in the grand scheme of things. It's just going to be a fantastic debut. That's it. Now, if he throws 4 picks, if he throws 5 picks, that's also okay, because he's going through growing pains. He's a young guy. He's inexperienced. He only had 13 college starts. He obviously showed in the preseason and kind of recently in September, as reported by many other beat writers for the Bears, that he's a lot farther along than any Chicago higher-ups would have expected. But that inexperience is still there. He still hasn't seen a full-speed NFL front especially one as talented as Minnesota, doing everything to confuse him and mix up coverages and blitzes and pre-snap alignments. That's something that he's going to learn ideally and going to be and going to get used to. But there could be rough patches early on, and it's perfectly okay if he struggles because he's learning now. It accelerates the timetable for him to learn is accelerated now. He's free to make these mistakes, and he's free to see how defenses are going to try to stop him and the Bears offense now. So in 2018 and 2019, he's more prepared, and he's not going to be as thrown off when defenses do this to him. And what this Trubisky Mitch-a-palooza debut does, as late as it should have come, it came better late than never, right? Is put the Bears franchise back on track if he's good. It keeps the plan level. It keeps the plan in place no matter how he plays for now. Because the important thing is he's playing and he's getting experience. That's the best way of summating it. That's the best way of putting this. I can't recall being as excited for a debut as that in a long time. And then the hope is, I mean, for pure fun's sake, do we not want to see him light it up on Monday night? I'm not going to be distraught if he doesn't, like I just mentioned. But let's see a solid debut. Let's see Dowell Loggins would come up with a fantastic game plan for him, making half reads, rolling him out, letting him use his athleticism in the pocket, getting Jordan Howard and Tariq Cohen going, and and seeing a guy take advantage of the weapons because that he has on offense with a solid offensive line, contrary to everything you read in the national media about the offensive line being the reason Mike Glennon struggled. They weren't. And these receivers being abhorrent when they're really just mediocre. Let's see all that put to good use and see hopefully the one in Trubisky get off on the right foot. I think, if anything, Bears fans have earned that. I think, if anything, people who follow this team have earned the right to be excited and the right to have that energy. I mean, if you read Andrew Link's, one of our newcomers this year, fantastic piece breaking down how Trubisky is going to change the Bears offense. Check it out. It is on the website. It is on WindyCityGridiron.com. That'll bring a lot more depth to how he'll be able to change the Bears offense and keep this energy and excitement going. As far as defensively wise, I mean, I kind of just mentioned it the same thing. Vic Fangio talked about today how Leonard Floyd, who many of you know I hyped up to the utmost degree in the offseason, defensive player of the year type, a superstar type, I'm not going to waver off of that. It's still only 4 games in. And as I suspected, as Fangio alluded to, a back injury's kind of been nagging at him. Clearly his confidence hasn't been at the best because of it as well. But he's had almost 2 weeks to rest from that. He's going to have a quarterback that can give him the lead and allow him to pin his ears back as a pass rusher. And you're going to see those big plays start to come more and more. If you saw him get his first sack at Lambeau, you saw him get held on another play where Aaron Rodgers launched that bomb, the 58-yard bomb to Jordan Nelson down the field. You saw him get held there and almost finish off Rodgers. He's going to start to get going. He's going to be that player that everybody expected. Same goes for Akeem Hicks. Same goes for, I think, guys like Jonathan Bullard and Roy Robertson-Harris, who after a strong debut has kind of also tapered off. This front seven for the Bears is going to be a little bit galvanized, and the health is important for them, and they've had a bit of rest as improved as I talked about the offensive line with Chris, with the Minnesota offensive line, that is. This is still a mismatch for them. This is still a defense of Minnesota's deficiencies up front the way they did last year on Monday night. Maybe not to the same degree, but the perfect opportunity to stat pad. This is the perfect opportunity to get a first interception. We'll note this. So the 2016 Bears set a franchise record low for takeaways. Currently 17 to be on pace for 12. So just one more than last year. Interceptions. So they're on pace for 0 interceptions through 4 weeks, to harass Bradford for Keenum, to really showcase the potential of this defense that many thought could be top 10 in the offseason. Because if any has been of this defense, surprisingly enough, Fuller, Prince Mukamara, a solid gift, who's been solid for the most part ever since returning from injury. Eddie Jackson, even Adrian Amos had a good game against Green Bay. On their part, and it's now time for the front seven. The reason the defense got hyped to help get some help for them in that respect. At any rate, Mitch-a-palooza begins on Monday night. I wish there was some higher level analysis I could offer that hasn't been already espoused to the utmost degree by me and many others. Just note Dowell Loggins' obvious enthusiasm. Clearly hasn't been his decision to play Mike Glennon. Just note the team pushing for Trubisky to start and kind of forcing this move as reported by guys like Benjamin Albright, that didn't come from the higher ups. And that should be enough to tide you over. This has been an incredibly long. This is for the guy that will hopefully take this franchise, that will end Chicago's longest championship drought. That week 1 of the Trubisky era starts on Monday night, October 9th, 2017. Is it the start of the rest of our lives? Hopefully. Let's see. Hopefully it begins. So overall, guys, this has been a little bit more of a terse Windy City Gridiron Radio. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for listening in on Christopher Gates and me just giving you all of this narrative afterwards for one of the Bears games in recent memory. Follow us on Twitter at WC Gridiron. Follow me on Twitter at Robert Zaglinski. Don't forget to follow Chris and everyone else in the staff there at Daily Norseman for your Vikings fix. And let's have some fun Monday night. It's okay to get excited. It's okay to get excited about Mitch Trubisky and the future of this team, regardless of what happens. Remember that. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Don't let anybody rain on your parade, your Mitch-a-palooza parade. Now is not the time. We can worry about concerns and legacies and whatever else later. Just revel in this moment. At whatever comes our way. Stay classy, everybody.